right, so we're talking about the life of Joseph, dysfunction in the family, and it's huge. And I'm going to give you a warning right now that a lot of what I talk about today, you won't remember. But there's a lot that you will remember. But it's necessary because we're starting off in Joseph's lineage. And we're doing this so you can see all the dysfunction that came before him. And part of the reason for that is I hear people say things, we all say them kind of ridiculous, like, I drink a lot, just my Irish blood, I can't help it. Or I like to fight, I just guess I'm Italian, that's just so or I got an Indian temper, and these things are silly. There's no truth to them at all. People say them because they're just trying to make light of stereotypes, but you can be the first to break any cycle in your life. In fact, I don't care who you are, in your family, you're probably the first to do something. It may be go to college. It may be a paramedic. It may be to control your temper. It may be to help the poor. But you're the first at something. And what better thing not to be the first at than having a strong relationship with God? Now, this is a thick sermon, and I tried to peel out a lot of it. But, man, I'm going to try to go quick on this first half. But you got to bear with me. We're looking at his lineage. First of all, is there such thing as a normal family? No, there's absolutely not a normal family out there. One that is 100% normal. I told my daughter, I said, if you think your friend's family is fine and normal, spend a weekend at their house. And you'll see things you didn't know you'd see and hear things you didn't know you'd hear. The fallen world we live in has put its crosshairs on the institution of the God-ordained family. And we've learned through the teachings of Christ that the most important and true family, and only family, is God's family, where we're all siblings. But we're still instructed to pour all of our love, teaching, and efforts into our own families and make Christ the head of that family. So our shortcomings are what define our constant need for God. And if you think your family is dysfunctional, you're in the large group of people standing in reality, because there's going to be some issues. But instead of waiting until the end of the message to wrap up with some life application, I'm going to start with the life application. So as I talk, probably very quickly today, you can think about this. And what that is, the life application is envy will kill you. And it will destroy everything in its path. And it will kill your family. And it will kill relationships. And it is vital to drive it out of your life and stay focused on God at all costs. Envy pops up when we don't even know it's there. Jealousy. And it's there all the time. And that's why we're looking at the life of Joseph, starting with his family roots, to see how deep envy can really run in a family. To this, listen, I'm telling you, when I counsel people in my office and they have some kind of problem in their life, I can always follow this trail to envy. There's always envy somewhere. Well, my mom doesn't talk to him that way. My wife doesn't give me half the attention she gives to the kids anymore. Or there's always some kind of jealousy. I'm like, there it is. I'm always waiting for it to pop up. There it is. Comparing yourself to somebody else, wanting what they've got, thinking you deserve more than they have in some way. Your family's not the only one that's dysfunctional. We all are. And we have to fight to stay the course with God if we're to fulfill our purposes. That's the whole point. Why we're talking about Joseph. If pride is the root of all evil, then jealousy is the snarling attack dog at the end of its leash. And it'll cause a lot of destruction. Proverbs 27:4 says, and I'll bring this up again later, wrath is cruel and anger a torrent, but who is able to stand before jealousy? That's so true. Joseph was a favored son, remember, but he was treated poorly by his brothers, and most people know these bullet points. And he overcame the betrayal due to his faith in God. But Joseph had a lot more to overcome than just the act of betrayal. He had to overcome a flawed moral value system that decorated the history of his whole family. He had to choose God's value system over a worldly value system, which is, what a lot of us typically choose. The moral background in our lives as we grow and develop is what sets the thermostat for what we'll tolerate, what we'll allow ourselves to get involved in when it comes to sin. Joseph was able to overcome something Huge. He was able to overcome something he was taught by example, a way of living, and then instead still go on to choose the path of God. So the Bible begins, we know the Bible begins in the book of Genesis and starts with Adam and Eve, and we know what happens there, the fall of humanity into a downward spiral, and it ends at the Tower of Babel, where it doesn't end, but it hits hard at the Tower of Babel, where God divides and scatters mankind into different languages and different tribes. And then after this, the book of Genesis puts a heavy focus on one family by following their genealogy all the way down, starting with one man, and that's Abram, known as Abraham, but I'll get to that in a minute. God makes a promise to Abraham. Now we're setting up this family line to Joseph, so stick with me. He tells him that he'll have several children, and that through him and his family, all nations will find God's blessing. God tells Abraham that while he and his wife, Sarah, even though they're old, that this is going to happen. They're going to have babies. Sarah's response to that, I think she's around 75 years old, is laughter. Oh, I'm going to have babies? Wow, a nation, that's something else. She laughs. She laughs at God and says, well, sure, yeah, okay, that sounds great. That was her response. Well, God later changed Abram's name to Abraham in Genesis 17 because his earlier name meant high exalted father. But Abraham means father of a multitude, which made it all the more comical to Sarah. God said, I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you, your lineage. So this blessing is ultimately the New Testament fulfillment of Jesus Christ, paying the sin debt to restore humanity's relationship back with God. The birth of the Islamic faith and the Judeo-Christian faith started with the same father. So, okay, let me explain this. Abraham has two sons. Ishmael was the first one, born to an Egyptian handmaid Hagar. Why? Well, because when God went to them and said, "Hey, you're going to have kids, and it's going to your generations, and it's going to go on," and they said, "Not happening. It's not happening." And she said, "I told you I can't get pregnant. Here, take my handmaiden, Hagar. Her name's Hagar. Have a baby with her. That way we can jumpstart this thing, get it rolling." So that's what they did. They didn't trust God. They didn't wait on God. Thought they'd take matters into their own hands. And Hagar had Ishmael. And his lineage went on to start the Nation of Islam and Muslims, who coincidentally hate, kill, murder Jews in the name of a satanic cult, which is Islam. Interesting what was spawned when Satan can get in the works and said, God's taking too long. You should hurry this up. Don't worry about God. Just you take care of it. And then you get Ishmael. And behold, now we see Ishmael's tribe on TV yelling, "Free, free Palestine," and "Kill the Jews," and attacking and murdering the Jews. That all started with Ishmael's bloodline. A lot can happen when you decide not to wait on God and go against him and laugh. That's what happened. 14 years later, despite the dysfunction, despite the problems, they have the son they've been waiting for. That's Isaac. Isaac is born of Sarah 14 years later. In fact, God tells him to name him Isaac. Name him Isaac. Why? Because it means laughter. Remember when you laughed at me? His name's going to be Isaac. That means laughter. And it's also because of the joy he would bring. You with me so far? There's some dysfunction there in Abraham and Sarah. So then we get to Isaac, and he has two sons with his barren wife. She can't have babies either. These women can have babies. So he prays that she can have babies, Rebekah. And so he has twins, Esau and Jacob, after God granted his prayer that she could have babies. Ready for more dysfunction? There's going to be a lot of it. And Genesis 25, 21, 23 says this. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire with the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb. Two people from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. That's what he said. Although this family is used to save and bless the world, this family is highly dysfunctional, and it's going to unfold more as we go. And if you think God, on a side note, won't use you for something remarkable in this life, and give you great meaning and great purpose, you'd be mistaken, because he will. This proves you're dead wrong if you think you're too far gone, your family's too messed up, or you're too jacked up to serve God. You're not. He works with flawed people. Otherwise, he wouldn't work with anybody. Right? That's the truth. Amen. So I said Isaac goes on to have his two sons, Esau and Jacob. Jacob is later named Israel. We'll get into that in a minute. Esau was the older brother. By birthright, he's the heir to the family inheritance, because that's the way it is. The oldest brother gets everything left to him, and he's in charge. But Jacob, with the help of his mother, devised a plan to trick their father, Isaac, and to trick Esau into stealing his birthright. Now, I can't spend a lot of time on this, but I'll just tell you quickly. This is in my notes. What happens is Isaac is old, and he's going blind, and Jacob and Esau's out in the field hunting all the time. He's got the birthright coming and they know what the lineage of the family is going to bring to the world. And Esau tells Isaac, I'm going out to hunt. And Isaac said, I want some good food. Go get something and bring it back. And so the mom hears this, and she said, Jacob, come here. Your dad said he's going to give a special blessing to your brother for bringing him food. Let's cook up some food, and you go in there, and he can't see. You pretend you're him, and he'll give you this blessing. And he's like, I can't do that. He's covered in hair. And she said, here, we get some goat skin and some hair. We'll put it on you. He won't know. He's not all there anyway. He's checking out. We can do this. He said, all right. So he go in. Hey, Dad, here's brought you the food you wanted. And Dad said, that was quick. How'd you get food that quick? And he said, oh, God put an animal out in the field. And he goes, really? Let me touch you. This seems weird. And he goes, oh. And he felt all the hair, and he goes, I'm Esau. And he goes, you sound like Jacob. No, I'm Esau. He's like, whatever. Give me the food. And I was like, I know he was like, whoo, woo. So they trick him. And then after he eats the food, he blesses him. He said, you're going to have everything. You're going to roll everything. You're in charge, Jacob. Or Esau thinking he's talking to Jacob. Right? Why did God honor that? I'll tell you that in a little bit. But so he stole, and then Esau comes back and they have a little discussion, and he said, you were tricked, Dad. And Isaac basically said, well, what are you going to do? I said it. It's the way it is. I don't know. Maybe God wants it this way. I'm full. Go away. And he's like, give me some kind of blessing. He goes, yeah, we're done here. And he's like, what? You got to be kidding me. At one point, he gets back from hunting, and Jacob's in there making soup, and he said, I'm starving, man. Let me have some of that soup. And Jacob said, no. Give me your birthright, and I'll give you some soup. He goes, my birthright? He goes, no. He goes, give me that. I'm starving. He said, no, you promised me your birthright, and I'll give you this red soup. And he said, fine, I don't care. I don't need a birthright. Just give me that. So he ate it. He gave him the stew, and he said, fine. So now Jacob's got the birthright to the family. Esau's pretty frosted. Now, a lot of you might be thinking to yourself, none of this was in my sermon, by the way. This is all extra time, so stick around. This is Esau. Esau loses his birthright, and you may think, well, that's a dirty thing to do. Why would you steal his birthright like that? And how could God honor that? Why would God say, you know what, we're okay, I'm okay with this? Here's why. Because Esau doesn't take it serious enough. He knew what was supposed to be in the lineage of his father. He knew he was the next in line. He knew nations and kings are going to come from the next one. And if God gives you in charge of something big, and you go, you know what? I'm going to live in the flesh. I'm hungry now. I'll deal with that later. I'm sure God's like, really? Really? That's how serious you take me? Is that how you think of me? And you know what's appointed to you, but you're like, yeah, I'm going to live in the flesh and make me happy now. It's no wonder. It's no wonder that happened. But that's what happened. So now back on script here. Lost my place because I went off on a witless jag. Now, this is where things get confusing. Remember, we're talking about dysfunction in the family. I'm sorry to laugh, but as dysfunctional as my family is, I can't hold a candle to these people. So when you're this whacked out, you get your own place in the Bible. Slide 2, please. Now, this is just for you to follow along and try to understand as I talk. This is the family tree. As Jacob sets out in life, he eventually has 12 sons. 2 of the sons, Joseph and Benjamin, are born from Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. Benjamin's the youngest, and Rachel is Jacob's absolute favorite wife. He just loves her the most. Joseph is the firstborn of her, the 11th son. And so much so, he gives him a special coat made of special colors to stand out among all the brothers. It's a constant reminder to his brothers that he is daddy's favorite. They get so sick and tired of seeing him in this coat that they actually want to kill him. They start talking about killing him. So after much deliberation and some swaying that was brought into the conversation by Reuben, he's another piece of work, they decided not to kill Joseph, but instead they would sell him in slavery down in Egypt. So Jacob was married to 2 sisters, all right? I'm going to try to make this fast. He was married to Leah and Rachel. They're sisters. First of all, this ain't my sermon either. Extra time you're going to spend here. He wanted to marry Rachel, and he told this guy, hey, I want to marry her. He said, work for me for 7 years, and I'll give her to you in marriage. Wow, 7 years. Hey, got married. Here's the wedding. Go into the dark tent and be with your wife. In the morning, he woke up, and it was Leah. He goes, wait a minute. I wanted Rachel. And he goes, we don't give away the youngest. We give away the oldest first. But if you work for me for another 7 years, I'll give her to you now. You tricked me. I'm married to one. How can you do this? Okay. So then he does that. 7 years, stays with it, gets Rachel as the wife. Leah, who he's not real attracted to, has 4 kids. Just 4 at first. And then Rachel says, I want kids or I'm going to die. And Jacob said, I can't help it that you can't get pregnant. Talk to God. He's in charge of these things. So then Leah has 2 more kids and gives her servant Zilpah to Jacob to have kids with. And then Rachel says, well, I just have kids with Bilhah, my servant, to do that. But I'll claim them. And I'm sure Jacob was like, all right. and he sorry. They were gotta recover from this. All right. So then Rachel miraculously gets pregnant. And she's the one he loves the most. And he's like, yes. She prays and she gets pregnant. And Joseph is, man, he loves Joseph. He loves Joseph so much. He's the favorite. So, as you can see, there was a lot going on here. And it's interesting because all this trickery, dysfunction, lying, and offering servant, it's just so much going on. Joseph, it says in the Bible, Joseph, being 17, he's only 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. Imagine this is your family, what you talk about at dinner time. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. They're out in the fields, right? And he brings a bad report to them of his father. And so he comes in, he snitches on him. Hey, Dad, they're not being lazy out there. They're not doing anything. Well, this didn't go over well. And I know we jumped ahead here, but listen to the dysfunction we've covered so far. He's marrying 2 wives. Not a good idea. 2 wives that are sisters. Even worse idea. 2 wives that struggle with infertility. Got to be a lot of mood issues going on in that house. 2 sister wives struggling with infertility who offer their servants to him. Train wreck. Train wreck of a household. Now you ask yourself, why would they work so hard to please Jacob? What is so special about Jacob? A lot. There's a lot special about Jacob. It wasn't just to please him. They wanted to be with him. They were like, I want to have his babies. Well, he was a rock star. Why? What do I mean by that? Well, here's what I mean by that. And this is where it gets interesting. There's a lot we can see Jacob in ourselves. Seize the world. Go get it. Take what's yours. Take control. You're in charge. You do this. Don't give up. Crush what stands in your way. That was Jacob. By the world standard, he was a go-getter. In the ancient culture, those in his family would have felt safe and secure under his supervision and care, and they would have sought to make him happy. They want to be around him. They want to be near him. They know they're going to be taken care of. Look, he fought with his brother in the womb. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but when they come out of the womb, he was grasping onto his brother's heel. He wouldn't let go. Coming out like, I got you, man. Fighting it. Remember they were jostling and fighting in the womb? And the mom's like, what is going on in there? But Jacob's in there. And that's what's going on. He fought with his brother in the womb. He went after everything in life aggressively. I didn't cover this, but he wrestled with an angel. He wrestled with God. Fight all night long. Wouldn't stop fighting. Got his hip. Walked with a limp. Said, I ain't giving up. I ain't done fighting. This angel, or God, who wouldn't tell him his name, he said, give me a blessing. I fought you all night. The angel said, what's your name? Like, what is this guy's problem? He won't stop. He said, my name's Jacob. He said, not anymore. Here's your blessing. Your name's Israel. Israel. It means you strive with God. You struggle with God. And you struggle with man. You struggle with man and you've won, and you struggle with God and you've won. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean he beat God. That means his own struggle with allowing God to enter into and take control of his life, he surrendered to, and that's winning. That's how you win in life, by surrendering to God. So he changed his name to Israel from Yaakov, which is Jacob, because of that struggle. Because here's another thing about Jacob's hard-headed and determination. When he was younger, he basically told God, you know what, before I call you my God, let's see how things go, and then I'll make that decision. What an arrogant jerk. What a way to look at God and a way to be. But that was young Jacob. You know, for those of you who don't know your Bibles real well, I'm sure you've heard the term when you've seen it in movies, or you hear somebody say, what God do you worship? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now you know where that comes from. They don't define who God is. It's not a God they made up. It's the God these guys made up. It's the three people whose lineage the one and only God used to start the chain that would bless the world. That's the God, the one God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's why they say that. If you've always wondered, why do they say that? Why don't they just say God? They're identifying who God is by his actions, not being defined by the fact that he was, invented, for lack of a better word. We've covered a lot so far, and there's been a notable amount of dysfunction. So we got 4 wives, 12 kids later. Joseph becomes the favorite son from the favorite wife. Everyone in the whole family knows it. It's painfully obvious. And Jacob pours favoritism all over this boy. Genesis 37:4 says, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him. They couldn't say anything nice about him. And so as bad as it is for his brothers to be constantly sickened by Joseph's position as daddy's favorite, he makes matters even worse by just making a brilliant decision. And I'm being sarcastic. It's not brilliant at all. This is in Genesis 35. They're out in the field. He tells his brothers about a dream he has. He said, listen, I had this dream, and we were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when my sheaf stood straight up, and all of yours bowed down before it. And they're like, what did you just say? You think we're going to worship you? Is that what you're saying? He's like, that was my dream, man. Just had a dream. And he said, and I had another dream too. The sun and the moon came out, and 11 stars, and they all bowed to me. And they're like, what? And he went and he told his dad, and his dad basically said, what's the matter with you? You think we're going to bow to you? Your brothers and me and your mom? Get out of here. Jacob thought, he didn't bring it up anymore. Not much more after that. Well, you can imagine they were already didn't like him. Now they're like, this guy. You believe this guy? So one day Jacob sends Joseph out to check on his brothers. They're out in the flocks, out in the fields working the flocks. Notice Joseph isn't. Gets sent out to check on them. So they see him coming. His brothers go, here he comes. Look at this. This is Genesis all in 37. Here comes the dreamer. Here comes the dreamer. They see Joseph walking down in his coat to remind him. And one of them said, you know what? Let's kill him. Let's just do it and get it over. Let's kill him and we'll throw him in the well. That's what we'll do. And then we'll see what happens to his dreams. But Reuben heard this. Reuben was the oldest brother. Reuben tries to stop this. He said, you know what, let's not kill him, okay? Let's not kill him. By all means, throw him into the well. That's fine. But don't kill him. What? Well, Reuben, here's more dysfunction. This guy's a piece of work, like I said. Reuben had an agenda. He knew how much his dad, Jacob, loved Joseph. He's like, man, the old man will lose it if something happens to him. Maybe it'll come back someday that I'm the one who saved him. I don't know, but I got to talk him out of this. He didn't want to do anything else to damage his relationship with his father. Guess why? Because he slept with his father's wife. Wow. How can you do worse than that? Made a bad decision. He was the oldest, and he would have been the heir to Jacob's household had he not defiled his father's bed, as recorded in Scripture. Genesis 35, 21 through 22. Israel, who is Jacob, moved on again and pitched his tent beyond Migdal Elder, where Israel was living in that region. Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Heard of it. It doesn't say he came unglued, but it said he heard of it. He never forgot. I'll tell you that. He never forgot about it. And he brought it up again. And we're going to jump ahead just so I can show you that he remembered it. We're jumping ahead of where we are in this current timeline to when he died. When Jacob was dying, because in that big old Jewish family, the boys are all standing around the father, and this is where he blesses each one with something, and he tells the oldest one, you're in charge, you get everything. So this is what Israel, Jacob, said to Reuben on his deathbed. He said, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. Here's where he shifts gears. Unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed and you defiled it. Well, that escalated quickly, didn't it? Starts off telling him who he is, you're great, and then he's like, you're a chump. I can't believe you did what you did. Woo! He never forgot it. Waited until that day. Reuben's probably standing there thinking, that's where the old man's going to put me in charge. Yeah, I know, I'm great. What? Can we do this in private? No. Nope. Now we're coming back in the timeline to where we were with Joseph. I'm going to read from Genesis 37. This is what we were talking about when they see him coming. Let's kill him. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing. They took it. They threw him in the well. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. They sat down to eat their meal. They looked up and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites. This is who goes on to eventually start the Muslim nation. Coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let's just sell him to the Ishmaelites. And we don't have to lay our hands on him. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood. And his brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern, and they sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. And Genesis 37, 32 through 35 says, then they got Joseph's robe, and they slaughtered a goat, and they dipped the robe in the goat's blood. And they took the ornate robe back to their father and said, we found this. Examine it to see if it's Joseph's robe. And he recognized it. He said, this is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. And then Jacob tore his clothes. He put on sackcloth, and he mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He was inconsolable. No, he said, I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave. So his father wept for him. So he never stopped. He was completely heartbroken. So a quick recap. Joseph's brothers, after deciding not to kill him, sold him as a slave to a group of passing merchants heading to Egypt. They dipped his coat in goat's blood, took it home to Jacob, saying, oh, look, he must have got killed by an animal. On a side note, isn't it interesting that Jacob, who used the skin of a goat to deceive his own father, was deceived by the blood of a goat? and he cheated his brother out of his birthright, and he was tricked into marrying somebody that was the wrong woman. Interesting how he had to experience some of these things. But back to Joseph. Joseph's brothers were not good guys. They were extremely cruel for doing this. And we skip ahead. They're later on in this book, there's a part where they're thinking back on this. And they basically address the fact where they say, God's getting back at us because we just sat there and ate while he was screaming in the background. We didn't even do anything to help him. Wow. Jacob was so devastated, the Bible said he refused to be comforted. And he wept over Joseph from then on. So he's taken to a foreign country, Joseph, sold as a slave. He's got a new master now in the Pharaoh's court, Potiphar. Potiphar is the captain of the guard, but the translation of that from the original text and from the Egyptian would be the lead executioner for the Pharaoh. But there's something about Joseph. I mean, I don't know what he said or what he did on that ride to Egypt, but to be taken off and then say, you know what, this guy's special. We'll put him in somebody's house. We're not going to stick him out in the fields making bricks and hay. He can serve Potiphar. He must have made an impression on someone. We'll learn that about Joseph as we go on. Anywhere Joseph shows up, people gravitate around him. And there's something about Joseph. All this turmoil, betrayal, or abuse by his own brothers, the pain. The Bible says something very interesting about Joseph. And it says that the Lord was with Joseph. Genesis 39:2 says, the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. Joseph went from being an exalted son, cherished and favored by his father, to being a slave in a foreign land, all at the age of 17. When I spoke at the Awaken conference and I talked to the kids, the theme I used for them, I talked about Mary and Joseph. I talked about a lot of people in the Bible, is how important it is you're not just some dumb kid. You're important when you're young. God did some remarkable things with very, very, very young people. And young people should never dismiss themselves as, well, I go to church, it's just what I do. They can change the world. Under the supervision of a father, he was a piece of work, Jacob. Under the supervision, he did all this at 17 years old under the supervision of a father who himself stole his birthright inheritance. And he was raised in a family plagued with poor decisions, sexual misconduct, inappropriate favoritism, jealousy, hatred, betrayal. Joseph found himself in a foreign world under horrible circumstances, still having a heart for what is right in God's eyes. Still having a heart. The Bible says the Lord was with him. So if you ever think you're embarrassed about your family, I mean, there's people in my family I don't want to be at, hey, isn't that your uncle? Yeah, let's go get something to eat. Even through terrible circumstances, God is there. It may not feel like it, but he was. He was with Joseph, and he's with you too. I don't care what your family is, what you think about cycles you can't break. You absolutely can. You can destroy them. Joseph never once threw his hands up and said, God doesn't care about me. I'm done with this. Look at what happened to me. If God loved me, I wouldn't be in a well, being killed. I wouldn't be sold into slavery. Why aren't you doing anything? He never did that. He didn't do any of that stuff. In fact, next to Daniel, obviously Jesus, for sure. But next to Daniel, Joseph's the only other person that I can't find any recorded sins of in the Bible. I'm not saying he never sinned, but I'm saying I can't find any that the Bible records. So it must be, there's nothing in there that tells me to think about, like Jacob. I mean, there's a laundry list. And Isaac and Abraham, there's a laundry list of stuff. But Joseph, there's nothing recorded in there about Joseph being in engaging in any of those things that I mentioned. So that says something about Joseph's fortitude to stay with God. He never profaned his brothers. He never renounced his family. He never talked bad about God. That's our mission, to remain faithful at all costs. Avoid allowing the sin of envy to dominate our hearts. The sin of envy is what put him in slavery. The power of envy and your jealousy will destroy everything. Even Stephen in the New Testament quoted the Old Testament about Joseph to address it. He said, and the patriarchs becoming envious, sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him. Stephen's saying, look what jealousy did, but God was with him. Envy caused Cain to kill his own brother. It caused Saul to chase David to kill him. In the story of the prodigal son, it caused the brother to ignore having dinner with his brother returning home. Envy set the murder of Jesus Christ in motion. Pontius Pilate said, the Jews delivered him over because of envy. What it said exactly in Matthew 27:18 is this. Therefore, they had gathered together. Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release to you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus called the Christ? Because they were both named Jesus. A lot of people don't know that. I think that's the way Satan wants to get out and corrupt and use gossip and chaos about what happened over there. Anyway, and in the next verse, Pilate said he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. They're jealous. This is where we come back to the verse I said you'd be hearing me repeat from Proverbs. Wrath is cruel and anger a torrent, but who is able to stand before jealousy? The sinner pays the ultimate price. I can't, listen, I mean, imagine them looking at their dad every day, weeping, inconsolable, knowing that they did this. I mean, every day, crying, upset, sad, walking. We've been around someone who's heartbroken. We all have, or we've been there. We know what it's like when you feel like you weigh 1,000 pounds and you can't move because the grief is so heavy. Imagine having to look at somebody who is that way because of you. They did. It was their fault. Their dad was this way. Jacob refused to be comforted. He wept for the rest of his life as he said he would because of their sins of envy. That's where we're stopping today. It went faster than I thought it would, but I hope it did for you. The next sermon that we're going to discuss in the series is we're going to talk about Joseph being put in charge everywhere he ends up because he stuck with God. And when you stick with God and everything looks grim, it's not. Joseph, unlike Abraham and Sarah, trusted God. Remember I said earlier, they said, well, this baby thing ain't happening. We better speed it along. Joseph didn't do that. He said, I'm here. All right.